Hey everyone, welcome back to Wix Fix. I hope you're having a fantastic day. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create an awesome accordion in edX with zero code. Now I will say that today we're basically going to be recreating another tutorial posted by Eve Silber. So I highly suggest you go check her out. I will paste her link in the description below, but we're basically going to be recreating exactly what she did in her tutorial here in today's video. So let's go ahead and get started. So I've already kind of designed the initial section here, and what you'll notice if I click on it is we basically split this into a 1x2 grid here, or a 2x1 grid, sorry. And over here we just have some text elements, which we're not really going to be touching, but over here we're going to be building that accordion. So let's go ahead and build the accordion part of it. So what we're going to do is add a container here into this right grid. Let's go ahead and set the width to be 100%. And we'll also set the height to 100% here as well. And we'll just remove the minimum height here. Let's also center this container here. Let's change the background to a white color. Now what I want to do is come over to add. We're going to go to decorative and we're going to add a vertical line here. So let's just drag this one out here. Let's make sure that this is our black color here. Then we'll switch over to the inspector panel and we'll set this to be 100% height and we'll send it to the top left, just like that. Great. Now let's go ahead and select the actual container itself and we're going to split this into a 1x3 grid. For this top row, I want this to be 40%. And we'll go ahead and change it for the max here as well. For this bottom row, I want this to be 100 pixels. And we'll set that for the max here as well. And then for this middle row, we'll set both of these to auto. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to stretch this second row to basically fill in the container, or the height for the container. So now what I want to do is I want to just go ahead and add some text up here. So what I'm going to do is just copy this heading text. I'll pull it up here into this top row and we'll make it drastically smaller. Maybe we'll do something like 18 and 22. Something like that should be a good size, but we'll make the width quite a bit smaller, something like that. Okay. Next, I want to add a paragraph, so let's just go ahead and copy and paste this one. We'll stick it right underneath this one right here. Okay. And I'm also going to just remove a lot of the words, so we don't need that many. And we'll also make this one a lot shorter in width. And we can actually make these a little bit wider. We don't need them to be like super short. And last but not least, we'll copy and paste this one more time. Bring this down here and we'll change this one to read now. And we'll switch the font over to prompt. Just like that. And we'll give it an underline. Okay. So now let's go ahead and grab all three of these elements. We'll go ahead and press stack. Then in the inspector panel, let's go ahead and align all the items to the left. That way it automatically docks them to the left, just like that. Now I kind of want to adjust the spacing. So here maybe we'll do like 40 pixels. And then underneath this one, we'll do something like 15. Something like that looks really nice. Okay, now I'll grab the stack. We'll center it. We'll dock it to the left and we'll set a 5% margin, just like that. Now in this middle row, I want to add an image. So we'll come over to add media and I'll just drag out this image right here. Let's go ahead and stretch it. But then what we're going to do is add a 5% margin on the left and we'll do the same exact thing for the right. And then last but not least, down here at the bottom, we want to add an arrow. So what I'm going to do is come over to decorative, come over to arrows, press more arrows, and then I'm going to use this one right here. It's going to add it to the page. And I want this to be a fixed size, so maybe we can do something like 50-50, just like that. And I want to bring this down here to this row right here. We'll make sure it is centered. We'll make sure it is docked to the left with 5% margins. Perfect. So now we basically have the initial design for the accordion, but now let's go ahead and create a few more. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste this. And what we want to do is with this one, we need to drag it like over here. You're going to notice that it's going to ask us to attach it to the other grid that we created, or the other container, but we don't want that. So let's go ahead and press escape, and we'll just go ahead and drop it right there. And maybe we'll actually bring it a little out a little bit more. Perfect. Okay, let's go ahead and copy and paste this one more time. And we'll do the same exact thing. We'll just drag it out a little bit, make sure we press escape, and we'll let go. Now, you'll notice that this is kind of making the website wider, which we don't want. So let's go ahead and grab the section itself. We'll come over to overflow content and set this to hide. So now it is not expanding the website larger than it needs to be. The next thing I want to do is go ahead and grab these containers. We're going to come down to margins and just make sure that there are no margins on the top and bottom, because we don't want that. We also want to just go ahead and dock it to the left hand side. So we'll go ahead and do that for both of these new containers. For this first container, we'll dock it 13.2, just like that. And then for this second container, we will dock it 26.4, just like that. Perfect. Now what I want to do is come over to adjust, and what we're going to do is basically adjust the initial state. Now when I start making changes here in this adjust section, you're not really going to notice anything here in the editor, but when we press preview, it's going to show what we have adjusted. The point of this adjust area is kind of to set the initial state for your interactions. So what I want to do is go ahead and set a 60.5% translation on the X axis. So basically it's going to move it right 60.5%. So you're not going to notice anything here in the editor, but as soon as I press preview, you're going to notice that this one is over here, which is exactly what we want to do. So that's basically us setting up the initial state. So what we're going to do is go ahead and set it up for the second one here as well. We'll do the same percentage. So we'll do 60.5%, just like that. And we are using a percentage instead of pixel value just to make sure that it is responsive. So we'll go ahead and press preview, and we'll see what it looks like here. And what we're going to basically want to happen is when a user hovers over to the second option or this third option, they actually slide out. So what I actually first want to do is actually go ahead and change the images to make it just a little bit more obvious that we're viewing the different accordion stuff. So let's go ahead and change it to this, and then we'll choose this one, and we'll change this image here as well. The next thing that I would like to do is actually come over to the layers panel, and you're going to notice that these are all called containers because we copied and pasted it. So we want this one to be container 1. Let's call this one container 2. And last but not least, we'll call this one container 3, just like that. That way we know what we are working with when we start doing the interactions. And speaking of, let's go ahead and start doing the interactions. So what we want to happen is when the user hovers over this second one, we want it to appear. So let's come over to the inspector panel. Let's come over to interactions. We'll come to effect, and we'll add a custom effect. Let's call this one reveal 2, and this one will be for the container 2. And what we want to do is translate this back into place. Now you'll notice here that we have an initial state, which is where it is currently because we adjusted it earlier to 60.5%. So now when we actually hover over it for reveal 2 effect, we want to translate this back to 0%. So now it's going to be right here. So we'll go ahead and press done. Next, let's go ahead and do the same exact thing for this container 3. So we'll add a custom effect. call this one reveal 3. Press start designing. We are on the hover effect right here. So we'll come over to translate and set this to 0, just like that. So now what we want to do is, now that we have the effects, now we can actually come over to the triggers. So what we want to do is add a trigger on hover. We want the effect to take place on this container. We want to apply an effect, and we want the reveal to effect. Now let's go over to the container 3. We'll add a trigger on hover. We want it to apply it to itself, and we'll select reveal 3, just like that. So now if we go ahead and press preview and we hover over this one appears. And then if we hover over this one appears. Now, what you will notice is that when we hover over number 3, number 2 disappears. So what we actually need to come over here and do is we need to come over to this container 3, make sure we are on triggers, and we need to add a new interaction. This one, we actually need to choose a different element on the page. So we'll choose container 2, press done. And we want to apply the reveal to effect to the third container. So we'll go ahead and press done, and we'll go ahead and preview it. So now when we hover over 2, 2 appears, but then when we hover over 3, 2 doesn't disappear, which is exactly what we want. Now in the original build, what she had happen was these arrows kind of turn when the user hovers over their item, and the text kind of appears and disappears as well. So let's go ahead and do that here as well. So let's go ahead and select this stack right here. We're going to add an effect. We're going to create a custom effect. We're going to call this one stack 3, just like that. And when it's being hovered on, we want it to appear just like this. However, initially, we don't want it to be here. So what we're going to do is go ahead and translate this 100%, just like that. And we're going to set the opacity to 0. Okay. Now we can go ahead and press done. Let's go ahead and do that for the stack number 2 here as well. So what we're going to do is say custom. We're going to call this one stack 2. And we want to switch over to the initial state. We're going to translate this 100% and change the opacity to 0. So now if we select container 3 and we go to trigger, so what we want to do is add a new interaction. We want to apply it to the stack. So let's go ahead and choose the stack. So we're going to come over to container 3, select the stack, press done. And we want to apply the stack 3 effect, just like that. So now when we hover over stack 3, the text appears, and we need to do that for stack number 2 as well. So let's go ahead and grab stack 2, or let's go ahead and grab container 2. We'll add a new interaction. We want it to be to the stack 2 element. So we'll come over to container 2, select the stack, go ahead and press done. And we want the stack 2 effect. Perfect. So now let's just go ahead and preview one more time just to make sure it's working. When we hover over 2, the stack appears. When we hover over 3, stack 2 disappears, but stack 3 appears. And that's exactly what we want. Now for stack 1, it's a little bit different because we want stack 1 technically to already be here. But when we hover over stack 2 or 3, we want stack 1 to disappear. So what we're going to come over here and do is we're going to grab the stack. We're going to create an effect, add an effect, and we're going to say custom. We're going to name it stack 1. And in the initial state, we want this to be here. However, when stack 1 interaction is active, we want to translate this 100%, and we want the opacity to go to 0. Perfect. Now we'll go ahead and press done. And what we want to do now is come over to container 3, come over to triggers, and we want to add a new interaction. We want to apply it to stack 1. So we'll come over to container 1, grab the stack, press done. and we want to apply the stack 1 hover effect. Okay, now we'll do the same exact thing for stack number 2 or container number 2. We'll add a new interaction. We want to apply it to stack 1. So we'll go ahead and come over here to the layers panel, choose stack 1, and we want the stack 1 effect. Perfect. So now we'll go ahead and press preview real quick. And when we hover over number 2, stack 1 disappears. When we hover over number 3, stack 1 disappears here as well. Now the last thing that we need to do here for this to work completely is to now do the arrows. So when this is active, so when there is one active, what we want to do is actually have this pointing to the right. So if we come over to layout and I go ahead and press adjust, we'll go ahead and rotate this -45 degrees. So it's pointing to the right because initially this is the one that's active, right? But these ones are the ones that are not. So let's go ahead and do this effect for container 2 and 3. So I'm going to grab the arrow here in container 3. We're going to come over to interactions, create an effect, custom. We'll call this one arrow 3. Go ahead and press start designing. Now in the initial state, we want it like this, but in the hover state or arrow 3 effect, we want to rotate it -45 degrees. So it's pointing to the right. Okay, now let's go ahead and do that for container number 2. So we'll grab the arrow, we'll add an effect, custom. We'll call this one arrow 2. Press start designing. And again, we don't want to touch the initial state. We just want to affect the effect called arrow 2. So we'll go ahead and set this to -45 degrees, just like that, and press done. Now for this one right here, for arrow number 1, we're going to do it a little bit differently. So we want to add an effect, custom, call this one arrow 1, press start designing, and we want this to rotate back to 0 on the effect, just like that. So go ahead and press done. So now when we hover over container number 3, we want to apply the arrow 3 effect and the arrow 1 effect. So let's go ahead and add a new interaction. We'll go ahead and choose something on the artboard. So we'll go ahead and choose the arrow in container 3, and we want the arrow 3 effect. Now we also need to apply the arrow 1 effect. So we'll go ahead and press this, and we'll apply the arrow 1 effect. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and grab container number 2. Let's add an interaction. So what we need to do is apply the arrow 2 effect. So let's go ahead and add a new interaction. We want this to be a custom interaction. So we'll grab the arrow 2 and we'll apply the arrow 2 effect. We'll grab the arrow from the first container and we'll apply the arrow 1 effect. Perfect. So now if we go ahead and press preview, you'll see that this one is active and it's pointing right. The text is showing here, or the stack is showing. Then when we hover over number 2, the arrow in number 1 rotates. The stack in container number 1 disappears. But in container number 2, the stack appears and the arrow changes the direction or the rotation. Now if we hover over number 3, the stack in container number 2 disappears. The arrow in container number 2 changes back to its initial state. And then in container 3, the stack appears and the arrow changes direction. And that is basically how you create a really cool accordion here in Editor X with 0 code in all interactions. Now, again, I do want to mention I basically recreated Eve Silber's tutorial here. So I'd really appreciate it if you all go and subscribe to her channel. Her link will be in the description below. But that's basically going to wrap it up for today's video. If you all did enjoy, please consider giving this video a like and consider subscribing for more Wix and Editor X content coming out really soon. Thank you all again, and I'll see you all in the next one.